This is the Wheatstone Broadcasting Corporation.
I'm Scott Fybush from Fybush.com at the Wheatstone booth, and we are talking with Wheatstone's very own legendary Steve Dove.
Legend. Yes, I'm the Minister of Algorithms. I write and design most of the signal processing code, which goes into most of our products.
And you have been working now, obviously, on new stuff, which we'll talk about, but also on trying to replicate the sound of some older boxes. Let's talk about that.
Yes, well, I did a presentation at the NAB Broadcast Engineering Convention yesterday, and it was it started off with my experiences about 25 years ago, where I was just learning DSP for the first time, and I landed this lovely little contract, and it was to emulate classic old hardware in DSP. Obviously, it was for plugins for the digital audio workstations which were coming along at that time. And as part of this contract, they foolishly gave me the means of acquiring stuff from New York recording studios and rental companies.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, well, okay, I'll start with a processor which I've known lots of. I know inside and out. I used to have a rack full of these things in front of house. The URI 1176.
Speaking of legendary.
Precisely. And so I called them up and said, send me one. And they said, well, we don't actually have one. They're very popular. So, but just a moment. And they managed to borrow one from a very well-known record producer in New York. And this prized unit turned up.
If this box could speak.
If this box could speak. And I put it on the bench, and the meter sort of did things, and it sounded awful. It was in really sad shape. It was in real dire need of good going over. So I thought, well, I can't really try and start emulating this. It would be stupid. Called them up, and they said, no, don't fix it. This unit has its own bathroom with its own gold records hanging in it. You can't do anything. Okay, so just for experimentation, I worked up an emulation of this precise thing in the precise condition it was. All well and good. And then eventually they talked to this named producer, and he said, oh, I never realized. Yeah, sure, fix it. Okay. Anyway, got it going, so I had a real live 1176 to emulate, and so I worked up an emulation for that. Guess which they used?
The first one.
Actually, they ended up using both. But to this day, flying around on the internet, you can come across an 1176 emulation called Floppy Hat, which was, from the sartorial affectation of this particular producer. So that's the story behind that one.
So that sparked an interest now in trying to be able to recreate even more of these.
Yes. Back then, of course, the idea was to try and create a museum of these older things. But I'm of the opinion now that, I don't really mind robbing graves. I'll go back and I'll steal from the brains trust of the old people and use their insights and use their accidents to inform what we're doing today and for products for the future.
So let's talk about then what the practical uses are. If it's 2016 or 2017, why do I want to be able to emulate a box that might be 40 or 50 years old now? What does it do for me?
Some of them had enormous character, and sometimes this character came from pure accident. They were really quite limited with the technology which was available to them at the time, and they were just really trying to make something work. And some of them had enormous character because of the nature of the technology which they had. For instance, optocoupler-based limiters. They have the most awful attack time thing. If you compare them to anything modern or anything done in the last 30 years, dreadful. But they sound great. People love them. They have this overwhelming attack characteristic that people adore. So yes, of course you're going to try and emulate that. People love it. People are in love. Well, people are strange things, but they develop fixed ideas on what, say, WNBC New York sounded like 35, 40 years ago. And they're carrying this kind of imprint in their head. And actually, when you break it down, it comes down to a few salient characteristics of a few boxes which were available at the time. Emulate those and do the reverb trick, and suddenly you've recreated WNBC. I'm not interested in making a museum. I'm interested in taking this stuff and progressing it further in today's idiom and without today's technology, which can take us even further, and has. That's why.
So are these presets that are going to find their way into boxes?
Well, a lot of them already are. I haven't really made public what, say, in the Wheatstone M1 voice processor, what the equalizer is emulated upon, or the compressor for that matter. But they are a fairly well-known units from history.
And of course, you work with some folks here at Wheatstone who are avid collectors of this gear. I imagine you've got pretty good access to a lot of boxes to play with now.
Oh, absolutely, yes. In fact, I've got a couple of... I emulated a compressor. Am I allowed to say that? And in the presentation yesterday, I wasn't quite sure whether it was legal for me to say that, so I just put up the technical measurement of it, which is actually quite interesting, and said that I was compelled to make this public.
What else is in the works from deep in your labs now?
Oh, we're forever progressing forwards. The means of doing DSP is steadily changing, and we're going to move along with it. And that has a whole new set of affordances and constraints. So we can do different things. We can easily move pieces of our DSP technology into products which otherwise didn't have them.
And obviously the availability of processing power now is nearly unlimited for you.
I'm a great believer in that whatever DSP platform you have will fill it quickly.
Some chip manufacturer out there is quaking now.
Yes, absolutely. I throw that out there as a gauntlet. There has never been a DSP platform I've ever written on that I haven't managed to saturate and spend half my time whittling things down to make them fit. And this is true, even with the massive multi-core processors which are available today. Oh yeah, you can fill them. There is, of course, one big danger. Back 20 years ago when we were doing DSP in tiny little DSP chips, the incremental cost of, we've filled this one, let's have another, it really wasn't that much. But if you've got a whacking great big board with an 8-core Intel on it, the incremental cost of breaking the boundary on that is huge.
Final question for you. Is it true that all of this sounds much more impressive with an English accent?
Oh, absolutely. I loved coming over. When I first started coming over here with rock and roll, 40-something years ago, European accents were far less common than they are today. And shall I just say that an English accent was of no disadvantage?
I can believe it. I can believe it. I'm sure there are some late night stories to share there.
Absolutely not.
Steve Dove, the Minister of Algorithms here at Wheatstone, thank you so much.
Oh, very kind. Thank you for having me.